everyone. Carol, hey, Catherine.
Hello, Eric.
See you. Jordan, Kathy, Carol, Arnie, Brandon. It is 4 o'clock. I think we have everyone. Should we, what do you think? Start, Marnie?
Is Jordan here?
Jordan's right there.
Oh, okay.
Yep, looks like we're ready to get started.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call to order the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea's Historic Resources Board regular meeting for Monday, August 15th to order. Please.
Board Member Croman.
Here.
Board Member Gualtieri.
Here.
Board Member Hall.
Here?
Board Member Pomeroy.
Oop, I thought we had Kat. There she is.
And Chair Dyer.
Here. Okay, great. So we have public appearances now. Anybody wishing to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda may do so now. Seeing none, we will go on to announcements. Any announcements from staff or board? Okay.
Actually, I'd like to just make a quick announcement. As you may or may not know, this will be Board Member Gualtieri's last meeting with the Historic Resources Board. And I just wanted to take a moment to recognize her for her service and her dedication to the board and to the community. She has just been such a pleasure to have on the board, such an asset to us all, and we will miss you greatly.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words, Marnie.
Yeah, just reiterate what Marnie says, and just obviously personally, it's sad to see you go, Catherine. But I know you have other commitments, and I know you need to be concerned with.
I have a camera blocker.
No matters. So we'll miss you. Your experience and knowledge and commitment to our board is something that's not replaceable. So
well, I appreciate the kind words from all of you. Thanks so much.
Oh, Catherine, I'm upset. This is the first I've heard of this, and I can't imagine. You've been my mentor. You are the one. You have so much experience, and I'm so sorry to see you go.
Well, I'm going to leave it in good hands. Everything is in good hands. Not to worry. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, we feel the same way, Catherine. I was really surprised.
Well,
I hope you're going to be okay.
Thank you. All will be well, and I appreciate those kind words too, Seth. And thanks, Kent.
We've been together a long time, girl.
I know, 1962.
That's right.
60 years I've known you, Kent.
wow, it's amazing.
Okay.
Okay, with that news, we have our consent agenda and the adoption of minutes from May 16th, June 20th, and July 18th. Why don't we start with the May 16th minutes? Is there any comments or edits that need to be added, or is there a motion for adoption?
Mr. Chair, since there are two members who were absent, perhaps I better make the motion to approve the minutes for May 16th.
Okay. Get it in front of me to see who was absent. I can second it then. We need a quorum, so who was?
I was absent.
Carol was absent. Who else was at that meeting?
Kathy was.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Those in favor of adopting the minutes? Aye?
Aye.
Or do you need a roll call? I'm sorry.
Can we do roll call, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
Board Member Croman.
Aye.
Board Member Galtieri,
Aye.
Board Member Hall,
Abstain?
Board Member Pomeroy, Board Chair Dyer.
Is Kathy, she's muted. Did Kathy?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't hear Board Member Pomeroy's vote.
Mediation
Kathy, you need to unmute.
materials.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Aye.
Thank you.
And I vote aye.
Thank you.
Okay. The board has adopted those minutes. Now the adoption of the minutes of June 20th, 2022. I believe Jordan and myself were absent for that, so
Let's start at 10:30 instead of 10.
please mute those. So is there a motion to adopt those minutes?
I will move to adopt the June minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Roll call, please.
I have not.
Board Member Croman,
Abstain.
Board Member Galtieri,
I was not at the meeting. I abstain.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Come through, but
Board Member Hall?
Haven't heard
Yes.
anything from him in the past.
Board Member Pomeroy,
Yes.
Chair Dyer.
It would, yes.
I'm sorry. Can please someone mute that? I was confused. I thought there was a Catherine. You were not that, and on the June 20th, you were not there.
I was not there on the June meeting.
So we don't have a quorum then. Is that
Yeah, I think you do.
Jordan was not there? I wasn't there. Is that right, Jordan? Yeah, because Jordan abstained. I thought you were there. But are you sure about that?
I would talk with Cody again. Maybe he sent it into the.
Marnie or can we confirm who was
So
at the
the minutes reflect that Galtieri, Hall, and Pomeroy were at that meeting,
Which meeting is it, Marnie?
June 20th.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we voting on July or June? I'm sorry.
I thought I said June. Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was not at the July meeting. I'm sorry. Yes, if I was at the June meeting, and I do vote yes.
Okay. So go ahead and continue the roll call if we were missing.
I believe I completed roll call for June
No, the
minutes,
engineers
correct?
are-
Do you need the roll call for July?
Going from
Not quite yet, but
engineers
I vote
a board of
I
5
abstain
months
from that
out
vote.
is kind of the average.
Okay, you were breaking up a little bit there.
We still have somebody not muted, I guess, from the public, perhaps.
Okay, so this is the roll call for the June 20th, 22 regular meeting. Board Member Croman.
We're doing it.
Abstain.
Okay, Board Member Galtieri.
Since I was there, I will vote yes.
Board Member Hall.
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy.
Yes.
Chair Dyer.
Abstain. Okay, so got that figured out. Now the adoption of the July 18th minutes, which Catherine, I believe, was the only
Yeah,
person.
I was the only one not there, and I will abstain.
Okay, is there a motion to accept those, to adopt those minutes?
I motion that we adopt the minutes for the July meeting.
I second.
Okay, roll call for this.
Board Member Croman.
Yes.
Board Member Galtieri.
Abstain?
Board Member Hall.
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy.
Yes.
Chair Dyer.
Yes. Okay. Takes care of our consent agenda. Now on to orders of business. And our first item is the discussion and perhaps approval of the final draft of the historic context statement update. Staff report, please.
Marnie, if you wouldn't mind enabling screen sharing for me.
Sebastian, can you give Catherine Wallace permissions for screen share? So while we're doing that, and Catherine starts loading her presentation, I just wanted to take a minute and recognize those who have been part of this process. This historic context statement update is long overdue. and the project did stall out during the pandemic. So what you're seeing today, this final draft, is a kind of a culmination of a lot of effort over the last couple months. Catherine Wallace, our associate planner, since she joined us in April, just dove right in working on this project in conjunction with our consultants, Seth and Kent. We couldn't have gotten this far without you, so thank you all for your hard work. Also, just want to thank the subcommittee members, Chair Dyer and Board Member Galtieri, for putting in the extra time and giving us input on this update. This is a really important document for our historic preservation program. And again, this update is long overdue. And then also just a quick thank you to the state of California for the grant. So this effort was funded by a $30,000 grant from the state, which is much appreciated. So what we're going to present to you this afternoon is the final draft for the 20-year period of 1966 to 1986. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
Thanks, Marnie. I'll try not to repeat myself too much. I know the board has heard this a few times, but in case we have new people joining, just another introduction of the final draft of the context statement. So if you recall, this was first adopted back in 1997. It has been updated before in 2008, and that brought the context statement up to 1965. And this update is covering a 20-year period, 1966 to 1986. It's a $30,000 grant from the California Office of Historic Preservation, and we're working with past consultants, that's Seth Bergstein, and also consultant Kent Seavey. We do have the subcommittee, and we've been holding subcommittee meetings and also public workshops. And through those meetings, it was identified that we'll need to do a phase 2 effort to more comprehensively update the whole document. We'll revisit that, but keep in mind for this evening, the update has primarily been limited to the 66 to 86 period. So in May, we had our first kickoff. In June, we had a public workshop, and then you reviewed a working draft in July. And throughout this process, the workshops and the drafts were advertised in the Pinecone and the city's Friday letter. They've also been posted online. We're going to be delaying taking the draft to the Planning Commission and City Council and the Coastal Commission until phase 2 is complete. This evening, we have Seth and Kent here. They'll be speaking to what changes have been incorporated since the working draft, but I'll just, if anyone wasn't with us last month, I'll give a quick reminder of what's been incorporated in this update. We have our 5 chapters of the context statement, and Seth and Kent have done a great job adding relevant information from the 66 to 86 period. And you might have noticed in our first chapter on prehistory and Hispanic settlement, this chapter could use more development in our phase 2, but for the time being, we've just made some minor edits. The economic development chapter has been beefed up with some history about Carmel's founding as a dry city. We have downtown architectural development that includes Carmel Plaza, 7th and Dolores, the Nielsen Market, the ongoing impacts of tourism, and commercial building moratorium and demographic changes. Similarly, the chapter on government, civic, and social institutions has been updated with discussion of the 1984 general plan and mayoral elections. But the bulk of the work has been in the architectural development chapter. There's been narrative text added and also style sheets for the styles most prominent in our era. And you may notice that the styles actually start in 1935. And if you're curious why that's earlier than our 66 time period, it's because those styles started earlier, but spilled over into our era. So these are the architectural styles that Ken and Seth have focused on, and we can go into them in more detail. But you might notice a change from the working draft was that we removed the international style, not because it's not a significant style, but just we don't have enough breadth and number of examples in Carmel to really picture the style appropriately. So this is not to say that an international style in Carmel wouldn't be found significant. We just don't quite have enough examples in our small town for it to merit its own section. We also further specified the Bay region as the Bay region modern style. And this was to really distinguish it from the first and second Bay region tradition styles. And Seth can speak to that a little bit more. We can come back to these slides, but I'll just quickly go through them. The minimal traditional, California Ranch, Bay region modern. Again, we can come back to these slides. Post-war modern, Wrightian organic, regional expressionist, and post-Adobe style. Seth and Ken have also added in missing language about how significance is determined at a local, state, and national level, and how we look at integrity. And they have also updated our timeline and the biographies of important architects. So with that, Seth and Ken are here with us today. I know they want to elaborate a little bit on some of the changes they've made since the working draft last month. So Seth and Kent, would you like to unmute?
Great, thank you for the presentation, Catherine. Great to see everybody here. Yeah, what I wanted to focus on really was just the methodology in which we incorporated the comments. After the last subcommittee and public hearing, I personally had a concern that there was enough question about particularly the Bay Region modern style that, especially from our subcommittee, that we wanted to flesh it out better, and also a SHPO comment about including more buildings from that time period. So we convened an additional subcommittee meeting, which occurred on July 21st. Catherine attended that as well, Catherine Wallace, that is, at Eric's office. He hosted it for us. And we hashed out changes, number one, incorporating some text in the introduction. More importantly, wanting to demonstrate to everybody, particularly addressing SHPO comments, that the style is continuing, and that we wanted to include work by significant architects such as John Thodos, who are essentially carrying this style into the modern era, into our modern era. So that's why you see a little change, some changes in the photographs there. That was a really productive meeting. So the results of the style modifications you see today, and Catherine explained the drop of the international style and the good reasons for that. So we were at about 85 to 90% then. And what we've done since is particularly address the SHPO comments. Once we got through the styles, the SHPO comments, or they were concerned about architectural biographies not showing enough Carmel buildings in them. So we went through and added as many as we could find. We added a few more architects to the list. We also updated a few artists in the appendices. And we wanted to make sure, particularly for the SHPO, since they generously funded this, that we addressed their comments, which you will see is happening in this particular draft. A couple other things to note, which I think were resulted in this really great collaboration that the whole team had, from the HRB subcommittee down to the planning department's work. I mean, particularly Marty and Catherine, particularly Catherine Wallace, tackled a lot of edits that were out of the scope of work for our assignment, fixing a lot of typos, and not just typos, but also looking at sources in the original document and wanting to make sure those sources are accurate. So there's a fair amount updated, thanks to the planning staff taking the lead on doing some of that. And that's resulted in a better document within the narrative sections. We also incorporated whatever public comments we had about even some of those earlier chapters. So I just wanted give a really big shout out to Catherine for doing that. We really appreciate it. Given the narrowness of this time schedule, we really wanted to focus on the evaluative aspects of this document. And what you see in those time periods that bridge World War II up to modernism, up to 1986, and also getting that architectural development chapter in a better narrative format that not only is chronological, but also explains stylistic developments better. And then we did a little tweak in calling our style sheets a visual presentation of Carmel architectural styles, 35 to 86. So it dovetails well within the architectural development chapter. So that's primarily where we are now. I would say, I think we're really happy with it. There's still a question of how we do a phase 2 or if we do a phase 2. Again, our focus always was, in case there wasn't a phase 2, that the document was improved significantly, and we wanted to make sure of that. And I really want to thank everybody for contributing. It was again a short schedule, and everybody put in extra effort, and we really appreciate it from the consultant side. We rarely get this kind of coordination and cooperation with planning staffs. It was just really, really helpful. So I don't have a lot to address for questions unless the board does. There has been some discussion that several of the John Thodos buildings in that Bay Region modern style are post-date 1986. And there's a question of whether we want to say that style is ongoing, maybe, instead of terminating in 1986. Frankly, think it's a semantic question, and we'll leave that up to everybody here to make that decision jointly. And it's an interesting question. We have our opinions about too, but we'll just wait for question periods on that. And I know you guys have a big agenda, so I'll leave it at that, and we'll field whatever questions are out there. Thank you. I'm going to go and mute now.
Okay. Thanks, Seth. So from members of the board, are there any questions or comments for Seth and Kent, or questions of staff about this?
Yes. I actually read through a lot of it. And what a Herculean effort. My goodness. Great job. One thing I noticed was on page 34 and on page 35, there were a couple of paragraphs, I think, that were identical to ones I had already read. And I'm sorry, I don't know where the earlier ones were, but I noticed it was exactly the same wording that I'd read it before. So you might want to just look back. I can understand how easily that could happen. Also, I noticed that some of the houses, examples of houses, were with numbered addresses, and I suppose within the area of influence, or whatever we call it, but not in Carmel-by-the-Sea, apparently. So I have a question about that, and whether there just weren't good examples in Carmel-by-the-Sea, or what that situation involves. And then thirdly, not sure about the timing on all of this, but Enid sales and the Carmel Preservation Foundation were certainly a historic factor and were not mentioned. And I know she was active in 1986. I'm not sure how far back she goes. I know she was also active after 1986. So could be, she'd be in the next iteration. I don't know how you've judged that. Same with Barbara Livingston, probably as a notable historically, but again, she was active probably after 86 and maybe before 86, I'm not sure. And of course, the Sunset Center was very much tied with Enid sales and her fights, I guess you'd call it. So those are my comments. Great job.
I echo what Carol said. I think it's an excellent job, and the city should be proud of it. I hope that nothing goes awry. We need the second tier, second influence of it, and so I would support the historic context statement's final draft.
Okay.
I agree. I think there's a little bit of fine tuning that still needs to happen, but overall, I mean, if you just look through the track changes version, it's, I mean, a lot of extra work even since the last time we saw it. Pictures greatly improved. So really appreciate you guys taking the extra time and effort on putting this together. And honestly, I don't know where the historical, some of the historical information came from, but I think that might be the most up-to-date historical information in Carmel that there is. So that was a pretty good job.
Okay.
If I may, just a response to Board Member Hall's questions. There are a few outer streets that have street addresses there. This is all within city limits, frankly, with the exception of the Butterfly House. So where we did not have street addresses, which is most of Carmel, as we all know, we just tried to keep it to intersect within an intersection that's close enough that where if someone walked or drove it, they'd be able to find the building. We felt we didn't want to count exact number of houses above or below an intersection, east or west. Number one, it makes the captions really long. And number two, I still believe the buildings are locatable, and I still think the public would prefer exact addresses not being revealed. There's sort of a three-tiered way to have to do it. We have to coordinate, we have to count the number of buildings, and then go to the Carmel map, and then go to the assessor, and then get dates. So that, I mean, just running down the dates of what we had took a lot of extra time between the last two submittals.
I think if I could just interrupt, Seth, I think Carol might have seen some captions from annexed areas of Carmel, and maybe that's why those have addresses, but most don't.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. They are annexed areas of Carmel. Yeah. So all 90% of what's in there is going to be our typical Carmel no street number building. Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing you should be aware of is that, take for example 7th Street. There are 3 or 4 excellent modern houses on 7th Street, but you would have to bring an arborist to clear the jungle in front of them to get a photograph of the building to give you some sense of the design form. So we had to be able to get the building envelope into the focus on these, so there'd be some sense of what was going on.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so I would just add to the that we will have a time for the public hearing, and then we'll bring it back to the board. But are there any specific questions for Seth and Kent at this point? That's fine if we ask them, but if not, I'll open the public hearing and see what the public has to say. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone here wishing to address the board on this final draft of the historic context statement update? See, staff sees anybody, just call on them. Because we did have a few from the last meeting, I know. Okay, I don't see anybody, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back. I'll just also commend the whole team, and especially Seth and Kent and Catherine for working so hard to put this together. It's excellent. I mean, there's so many aspects of it I really appreciate, and not least of which is the, as Jordan mentioned, the great history that was added, especially in the civic policy development. It was really great to read through that and understand that the different stories that went on in that during this time period. I think we worked through the styles very well. I think that all works really nicely. I had a couple very minor questions, because I would say I think this document is in shape for us to vote approval on it at this meeting, and I would encourage that. But I just have a couple of questions I wanted to ask about. So Seth and Kent, let me just go to my version of this. So I just had a question on page 35, which was, I think it was 35. Oops, it had to do with the general plan update, and there was a note about new hotels are permitted in the new RC. I guess I just wanted to confirm that that was actually the case, since I forget when the moratorium on hotel rooms actually was put in place. Maybe that was after the 1984 general plan, but I'm not sure. I assume you got that from the document itself, so. Can you confirm that one? Or do you-
I cannot confirm that exactly when the hotel moratorium occurred. It may have occurred after 86. The general 1984 plan was when adoption began. So some of the nuancing of when that occurred, I was not able to get. And frankly, I did not. I read mostly secondary or newspaper summaries of the plan, where we tried to obtain the plan itself and we're not able to do it quickly enough. Okay. So that's certainly stuff we could hash out at the next phase, or possibly in the next little period of time if that's something you think we really need to do.
My only question is just that it's factually accurate. So if whatever is factually accurate should go in there. So I'm not saying it one way or the other.
Okay. I'll make a note to review that.
Here's another really super minor one, page 51. This is dealing with the James House and Charles Green, and then there's there was a date in there that looks like it was corrected, and it's either, I think it's 1918. Is that it just has two numbers that are still
the
there.
James House? The James House began in 1919.
No, it says the GL James House engaged Charles Green in 1918, or it's
1918 would be correct.
Okay.
It began work in 1919 to 1922.
So that's okay. So that should be fine. I'm actually looking at the red line draft, so that's probably my problem. And then my only other comment is that I think you did add biographies of several architects from this updated era, and it seems to me those should be added to section 9.6 on page 102. Which has or do you have a comment on that one? I mean, that's another very simple fix, I would imagine.
Just we're not sharing screen. Could you remind me, is that the who's who section, 9.6?
No, this is it may be, but it's like, okay, the one before it is 9.5.1 artists working in Carmel. And you do add, a couple of different painters to that, like David Laguerre and Gerald Wasserman and Paul Crooklyn Mays. And then the next section is 9.6, notable architect designers.
Yeah.
We can update this page as well. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, that was actually a good one, Eric. I cross-checked the architects, but the artists, but I don't think I cross-checked that with the new bios.
Yep. So that's okay. All very simple. But other than that, I think it's an excellent job. I mean, I would encourage the city to do the overall update in a later phase, but I think this gets us a long way there, and meets our timeline. And so I would encourage the board, hopefully we can vote this approval of this with those slight alterations and move it forward. Any other comments from the board? Okay, is there a motion to, let me just clarify this from Catherine or Marnie. Should the motion be to approve the final draft of this historic context statement update, or do you need any other parts to that motion? Or is it a recommendation to approve those before the city council?
Yes, so the resolution that we've brought before you this afternoon is a recommendation to the city council to adopt the update.
Okay, so that is what should be the motion. Does anyone want to make that?
Mr. Chairman, as a member of the subcommittee and a strong supporter of what Seth and Kent have put together, I make a motion that we approve the resolution recommending city council approval of this update to the city's historic context statement for the 20-year period of 1966 through 1986 and the accompanying changes that have been added to make the document stronger.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman?
Yes.
Board Member Gualtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Chair Dyer?
Yes. Thank you. Thanks again, guys. Great job.
Really appreciate it. Thank everybody. Thank you, everybody. It was really a great team effort. And thank you, Catherine Wallace, in particular. I've been thanking you via email this whole time. But
yeah, she has worn out fingertips.
Yeah. I mean, just a tremendous help. So thank you so much. And we'll be in touch on anything final we need to do.
Hey, Catherine, fair wind and a smooth sea.
Yeah. Please take care.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, we have the next item on our agenda is DS 2300 Clausen, consideration of adding an historic resource to the Carmel Register of Historic Resources, waiving the on-site parking requirements, and issuing a determination of consistency with the Secretarial standards for treatment of historic properties for Design Study 2300 for single-story additions totaling 430 square feet to the historic Zanetta Catlett Cottage located on Dolores Street, 5 northwest of 2nd in the R1 district. Staff report, please.
Well, thank you, Chair Dyer. So the project before you is an 839 square foot cottage. There's a 185 square foot detached garage on the property as well. The cottage was designed by Hazel Watrous, constructed in 1924 by Alan Tyler. And this property was just added to our local historic inventory last year in 2021. The character defining features of this resource include its asymmetrical plan, the intersecting gable roof, arched windows with shutters and arched doors, multi-paned windows, overhanging eaves and exposed rafters, the stone chimney, the board and batten siding, also the landscape setting, as well as the detached garage. So the applicant is requesting to add the property to the Carmel Register for the purpose of requesting a waiver of on-site parking requirements. We're also asking the board to issue a determination of consistency with the Secretary standards for additions and alterations to the cottage. So the lot is a standard 4,000 square foot lot. And again, the existing cottage is 839 square feet. The applicant is proposing a 22 square foot addition off the kitchen, which is shown in this area here, as well as a 403 square foot addition for bedroom and bathroom. So as required by our historic preservation ordinance, a phase 2 evaluation of the alterations was prepared by a qualified consultant. So Meg Clovis performed the review for this project. She did find that the project is consistent with the Secretary's standards, and she highlighted 2 standards in particular that have special conditions associated with them. So the first one is in relationship to the stone chimney. So the standards do encourage repairing first with limited in-kind replacement or compatible substitute materials. We are aware that the stone chimney, while it is a character-defining feature, is structurally compromised. It's currently unsafe to be used. So one of the conditions on the determination of consistency is that a structural evaluation will be performed on the chimney, and the structural engineer will determine the extent of repair or reconstruction required. And then also, as part of that evaluation, any new materials and methods of repair will be identified. So we are asking the board, when issuing the determination of consistency, to include these conditions, and staff would follow up on these items with the applicant. The picture on the right-hand side is a sample of the stone that could potentially be used as part of the reconstruction. The stone is also going to be used on the hyphen connector connecting the historic cottage to the addition. So also under standard 6, the board and batten siding is a character defining feature. Again, the Secretary standards recommend repair first. We are aware of some dry rot and termite damage And there is a possibility that once the project gets underway and the walls are opened up, that the extent of the damage could be greater than what is visually accessible today. The lack of a proper foundation and direct contact between the cottage with the soil certainly has caused some dry rot in the board and batten siding over the years. So in accordance with the standards, again, the applicant will take a repair first approach with limited in-kind replacement of the siding or using a compatible substitute material. But if there is a extensive level of deterioration, then at that time, the applicant would document the extent of that and propose in-kind replacement of the board and batten siding. With respect to standard 9, there's an existing kitchen sink window. It's on the north elevation. This is a secondary elevation, but it has been identified as an original window. Due to a leveling of the finished floor area, this window opening will need to be altered. So this existing window cannot be retained. So it will be replaced. And then also with respect to standard 9, with the bedroom and bathroom addition, in order to be consistent with the Secretary's standards, the wall cladding does need to be compatible but differentiated from the existing cottage. The applicant is proposing a smooth plaster finish and then painting it in a softer shade of green. The applicant has provided a sample of the green color, which is in the bottom right corner of this slide. And the phase 2 report did find that plaster is compatible with the fairy tale style designs and is an appropriate treatment for this addition. So with that, staff is recommending that the board adopt a resolution adding the Zanetta Catlett Cottage to the Carmel Register, waiving the on-site parking requirement, and then issuing a determination of consistency with the Secretary's standards. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marnie. Any questions of staff from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing to have the applicant or applicant's representative here to present the project.
Hi, my name is Brian Clausen. I'm the owner of the property. Also, I have our architect on the phone as well, Adrian. And
yes, I'm here.
I think just before Adrian answers any question about the design, I wanted to just share a little perspective on what we're hoping to accomplish. This house has been in our family for over 50 years, and we have no intention of selling the house or of making it available for broader use through commercial things like Airbnb. This is really just a place that's been in our family, and we want to preserve the character of as much as possible. It has reached a stage where there's a reasonable amount of disrepair, and so one of our goals here is to really improve the physical condition of the house so that it is ready for the next 50 years of its life. And the second is we would like to do a small expansion so that we can just functionally make the property something that has room for us. And we have 3 college-age children. We'd like to be able to have them meet us there in the future. But really our considerations here are not for resale. They're not for commercial purposes. We very much appreciate the historical nature of Carmel and of the property, and want to preserve that and really view ourselves as the stewards of this property over the next generations. It's something we expect will be in our family for many more generations. So,
great, thank you.
But yes,
Hi, my name is Adrian Lopez. I'm with Formas Design Studio, and I will be happy to respond to any of the questions if any arise.
Okay. Any questions of the architect? No. Okay. You can always open the public hearing back up if there is.
Sure.
If you want to respond. With that, I will ask any other members of the public wishing to address the board on this application may do so now. Okay. Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Is there anyone who wants to start with this one?
Kathy, would you like to?
Sure. I think the addition looks too different and too modern. I think they should be able to put that addition in because the cottage is so tiny. And there was mention about how low the ceilings were. I just think the addition would look better and more, I know you want it to look different, but it just looks too modern and too different. I'd rather see either board and bat, maybe that's different board and bat or stone in the front, because I think the stucco or plaster is just too different. It could be there on the side, but I think the part that shows for the street, it just looks too different. The color looks too different to me. It's not compatible with the original house.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I have a slightly different view than Kathy's. I think what I focused on in the report was that the phase 2 report discussed the fact that the new addition should be subordinate to the historic building, shouldn't compete in scale or in any other way, and not overpower it. And that's a message that sometimes we have a hard time getting across to applicants. And I think Mr. Clausen and his team have handled the size of the addition well. And also that it's on a secondary side or rear elevation. All of this impressed me to the point where I thought this particular phase 2 report could almost be a lesson plan in how to prepare one and how to work with a homeowner to bring an addition in with a hyphen in between. I guess that's the way we would put it. And have an opportunity to save the building and allow it to be used as it has been for the last, sounds like 50 years or more by the Clausen family. I didn't have any problem with the application. The differentiation didn't bother me so much. And I'd be interested in hearing how you feel about it, Eric.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Any other board member wish to speak on this item? Okay, I guess I have a few comments. I mean, in general, I agree with Catherine. I mean, it's such a fantastic property, and I'm so happy the Clausens and their team are taking upon themselves to really rehabilitate it and improve it and really improve the functionality of it, which is such, in my mind, has always been such an important part of preservation, and that by improving the functionality for future generations, it really incentivizes preserving the property. And I think that's what they're getting, especially when you have such a small house. It really needs to be made more useful for the family, which is great. It's a difficult site, but I think they handled it really well in terms of placing it at the rear, and it's basically shrouded. A lot of it is shrouded within the trees in front of it, which I thought was great. I don't know if we have the ability to look at the drawings again. Marion? I just had a couple of comments on some particulars about it. I guess I'll start with the stone chimney. So that was, you can keep that one up actually. But I'll just mention the stone chimney, which is, it looks as I looked out there, you know, obviously an unreinforced stone. That probably, I mean, I'm fine with the mitigation of investigating it structurally, but if it has to be taken down, I think that would be an opportunity to even improve the situation and reconstruct it back to where it was, because it's clear from the photo that you saw that the firebox, the brick firebox on the exterior at the bottom is not original. And so it'd be, I'm sure the original stone came all the way down and formed that firebox on the exterior, which if you reconstruct it, you can make that happen, which would be great. And I know it's important in these Carmel cottages to really have a workable fireplace. And I know Mrs. Clausen mentioned that hers was a fire hazard and was not usable at this time. So the thought of, you know, reconstructing that, making it work safe, and also basically reconstructed as it was intended or it was originally is a great opportunity, and I would encourage that. Now I just want to talk about a few minor things, one of which is in the photo or the slide you see here on the left. As staff will know, I have been particular about addressing new to old and being very careful about creating just little ways to make the original historic parts distinct. And one of the things we try not to do, as you see in this photo, is flush out the historic wall with the new wall. So you can see how this, in this image, the board and bat is in the same plane as the stucco, and the fascia is in the same plane as the original fascia coming across. And so what I would encourage is that to have some setback. It can be as little as 6 inches and maybe even a lowered roof, such that the forms can be distinct. And so that new section, which is necessary, and I like the fact that it's glazed like that to differentiate it from some of the new stuff, it is just a distinct form, so it's not confused with the original, if that makes sense. I think the stone hyphen is okay. I would just encourage the lay pattern to be something that meets the Carmel guidelines. I would also mention in the rear yard, we kind of have the same problem. Do you have the rear elevation? Arnie, if you can pull that up. Close. It's in the drawings somewhere.
Okay, if you give me just 1 second, I can navigate to it.
It's basically the same issue, is that the rear elevation is all on the same plane, which I understand that works functionally, but I still think the forms need to be differentiated. The bridge isn't really defined as a form, and more importantly, it flushes out again with the original wood siding, board and bat siding of the original section on the north. I think it also gives an opportunity to make the roof system and the wall system a little more clear, if you can pull that up. Yeah, I guess you can see it in that, or the west elevation there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can see how that's, by being in the same plane, the roof forms.
Sorry, just 1 second.
The walls and the roof could be made a little more clear. And then again, you need to have some relief between the stucco and the board and bat siding. So, I mean, in one way to do it, if you're setting back the section that acts as the hyphen just slightly, you would be able to distinguish between the flat roof form and the hip roof form of the addition. I think that make it a little more appropriate looking. I also really appreciate looking at the fact that they're leaving the garage basically untouched, because you really see that from the street, all of that form. And so that's great. And then the opportunity to really redo this landscape, which is part of the historic setting, is great too. I mean, it's a beautiful front yard they have. So those are my comments. But I think they're fairly subtle, and maybe that could be handled by staff if the board agrees with those to be added to the motion, those small corrections.
I agree with those changes.
And is that, I think the staff understands those, because we've implemented those or had a lot of different projects, put those into practice.
So just for clarification, so at the hyphen, the offset, it seems clear to me. But how about the 22 square foot addition at the kitchen?
Some of that can't be fleshed out. So that wall needs to be set in. The addition wall needs to be set in from the wall of the original house. And I would also recommend lowering the roof so that it's even a separate roof form.
Okay. Could we have maybe the designer respond?
Sure. I'll open up the public hearing, and the designer can, Adrian.
Yes, hi. I get the concept, and I totally agree on the separation of textures, of course. I mean, we have some complications there because the setbacks, et cetera, but I think it's something that we can achieve. Definitely, having different textures on the same plane is always a conflict. We did that. Well, actually, there is a small change in the veneer because the plaster is sticking out or in the rear a few inches, maybe a couple inches, and then the stone, I believe that is recessed 2 or 3 inches. We can try to achieve more and actually define the volumes better, which I totally like the idea. So I don't have any negative comment about that. I think it is possible. We will do our best.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm sure you could achieve that, and obviously by setting it in, you do lose a little bit of floor area, but it's minimal. I think it's worth.
Yeah, that's not a big problem. The thing that I'm more concerned is about changing or reducing the roof height in the new addition. That is going to be probably a more problematic situation because the way that we have everything laid out. So do you think that is something necessary to differentiate the kitchen roof?
Okay, I think
from the living room.
Okay, in my opinion, I'm one person on the board voting, but I would say I understand that point. I think that's in an ideal world that would be reduced, but I understand the problems with that. So I guess what I would say is that if you set back the stucco wall, I think it needs to be at least 4 inches, 2 inches. I think you need to have a corner of some sort. I could accept the roof being continuous at that point.
Yeah, Eric, the reason that I say that is because when you break the roofs and then they are 6 inches apart height wise, start getting construction wise gets complicated and it doesn't look clear either or clean. So sometimes it's just better to enclose the whole area under one roof, and probably it's easier for construction and it's very clear and doesn't get too sketchy, the final result. We don't have a possibility to differentiate the roof like let's see a couple feet height, we have 2 feet difference between the kitchen and the living room. That is not possible because the room layout. So they will be just very much, at the same height, and it won't be even noticeable. That's why I asking you.
Okay. Well, and I think another argument to leave the roof is that it is on the, it's not a side that's easily seen. So again, and there is issues with it being just a little too fussy, having different wharf forms coming together. So I guess I could accept that as at least in terms of what I would make a motion for, would be to allow the roof to be continuous like you have it, and then set back at least 4 inches the wall of the stucco in the kitchen addition from, so you have a real corner created with the original building. And then I think it's easier on the back actually.
Yes, we are in an agreement on that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other, since I have the public hearing open, any other members of the public wish to comment on that or anything regarding the application? Okay, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. So with all that, a lot of architect speak, sorry. But is there, about ready for a motion? And maybe I should clarify what I was asking for so it'd be easily implemented into a motion or included in a motion, which would be the addition at the kitchen where you have the stucco should be set back minimum of 4 inches from the original building to differentiate it clearly and create that corner. And that the form on the rear of the bridge, that stucco, is reduced back at least the 4 inches as well. And then again, there you have a clearly separate flat roof from the other hip roof. So those are my two recommended conditions to be added.
Let me try this then, Eric. I move that we add a historic resource to the Carmel Register, adopt a resolution adding the Zanetta Catlett Cottage to the Carmel Register, waiving the on-site parking requirements, and issuing a determination of consistency with the Secretary's standards for the treatment of historic properties for the additions as shown on the plans, and that the architect's recommendation to add the kitchen setback 4 inches and the rear, if I got this right, form of the bridge reduced as well to create a flat roof.
Well, the flat roof is already there. It's just to set back the wall.
To set back the wall.
So it's not fleshing out with.
All right. To set back the flat, no, to set back the wall. Okay.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? And is that, well, before I ask for a second, is staff, clear enough for staff as a motion to move forward with?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Okay, with that, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman?
I am recused from this property.
Board Member Gualtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
I am recused.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Chair Dyer?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to the next item, DS 22228, Takezawa, consideration of a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior Standards for Design Study Application DS 22228 for an after-the-fact demolition of a hipped roof on the historic Artie Bowen House located on Casanova Street, 4 southeast of 9th Avenue in the R1 residential district. Staff report, please.
Well, thank you, Chair Dyer. Give me just one moment here to share my screen again. Okay, so the The project before you is a determination of consistency with the Secretary's standards. The R.D. Bowen House is a 1906 craftsman bungalow. It was constructed by Arthur Bowen, who was a local builder. The character-defining features of the cottage include the cottage window on the front elevation, the bay window opening, as well as the wood shingle wall cladding. Also, the window opening on the north elevation within the 1906 portion of the cottage is considered character defining, as well as the hipped roof form. So back in April of 2021, the board issued a determination of consistency for the Takizawa project, which includes a 177 square foot addition towards the rear of the property, and then construction of a 210 square foot detached garage in the existing driveway. The project went on to be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission in June of 2021. And in January of this year, the building permit was issued and construction commenced. So the Secretary of the Interior standard for rehabilitation, which is the standard that this project was reviewed by, states that rehabilitation is the act or process of making a compatible use for a property through repair, alterations, and additions while preserving those portions or features which convey its historical, cultural, or architectural values. So as I mentioned, the hipped roof was defined as a character-defining feature. And in the prior approvals, that hipped roof was identified to be preserved. During construction, the hipped roof was demolished and staff engaged a qualified professional to prepare a phase 2 addendum to evaluate the demolition of this character-defining feature and how best to reconstruct it to ensure that the new roof matches the old and is done in a way that is consistent with the Secretary's standards. So Standard 6 of rehabilitation states that deteriorated features will be repaired rather than replaced. And where the severity of the deterioration requires replacement, the new features shall match the old. So the Secretary's standards do acknowledge that sometimes the level of deterioration is beyond the ability to repair, and reconstruction at that point is appropriate. The standards also state that any missing features can be substantiated by documentary and physical evidence such as photographs. So the photographs on the slide before you were taken by the applicant and their team, the structural engineer. This shows the condition of the roof, obviously as viewed from the interior prior to demolition. The structural engineer did provide a report stating that the that the existing ceiling framing was overspanned and that there was evidence of termite damage. So a decision was made to demolish the roof and reconstruct it. However, at the time that this decision was made, the applicant did not come back to the city to have the demolition or the evidence of deterioration verified. So there was some lack of communication there. And as you saw on the tour today, the roof, they proceeded with demolition of the roof. So the hipped roof feature is gone. So in accordance with the Secretary's standards, missing features can be substantiated by documentary and physical evidence. Again, demolition is complete, so that roof form is not there anymore to really catalog for reconstruction. Also, we don't have the benefit of original plans as they're not on file with the city. So the reconstruction would need to be carried out based on photographic evidence and then also drawings that were prepared by the prior architects. So with that, staff is recommending that the board adopt a resolution issuing the determination of consistency. There are special conditions that have been included to ensure that the reconstruction is carried out consistent with the Secretary's standards to the best of our ability. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Marnie. Is there any questions of Marnie? Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is the applicant or applicant's representative here to?
Yes, this is Adam Jesselnick. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Adam, I hear you.
Thank you, Chair Dyer, members of the board, and thank you to city staff for their preparation of the report for tonight's hearing. I'll keep my comments fairly brief, but we are, of course, looking for your support in order to move this project back into the construction phase, as it's basically been sitting now for a few months without significant progress. There were just two things that I wanted to bring to the board's attention that I felt like were important in acknowledging where we're at with this project. The first one is just that it's always been the intent of the owner, of myself as the designer, and of the contractor to follow all of the city conditions of approval, to maintain the character defining features, and to ideally bring this historic cottage back to life and into the 21st century. So there's never been any ill intent towards this historic building. It's always been for the purpose of shoring it up, the portions that can be shored up, and modernizing it for future use. With that said, the plans that were submitted and approved by the building department did show new structural framing at the roof. So the contractor essentially was building from the approved building permit set of plans. And while we understand staff's position that we're back before you today in order to clarify what the character defining features are and how they should be reconstructed to match, I just feel like it's important to bring that to your attention and just to really emphasize that there was, again, no intent to demolish any portion of the structure that we felt that was historic. With that said, of the conditions that were added, and we only had a chance to review the staff report just a few days ago, there was mention of roof shingles basically to match existing. And so something just as a topic of discussion would be, my understanding from reviewing the permit history was that the roof was last replaced in 2007, which means that we don't really have a record of a historic wood shake shingle roof to go back to and match. So I think it's just the first sentence of that condition that may need to be amended or edited in some way so that we can just be clear about what's the expectation for the new wood roof. Again, only the front portion of the cottage was historic. More than 2/3 of the house was the result of later additions. We do fully intend to make the house meet all of the standards and to look very consistent and cohesive in terms of the design. But I just want to make sure that we are understanding exactly what the city expects in terms of the use of specific materials. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Adam, I had a question. Did you or the owner or the contractor, what kind of documentation do you have of the original roof, the slope, the height? What is, since it's now been taken down, do we have any exacting documentation other than the photographic evidence?
Sure. I think that the slope and the dimensions of the roof essentially were added to the as-built drawings of the existing house. So I think we're clear on what that needs to be to match the original. And there is even a portion of the original eave. I'm not sure if you were able to see that today on the north side of the house, which we can use as a way to match what was original.
Yeah, we weren't actually allowed on the property was locked up when we got there. So
okay, I think it's visible in one of the photo attachments, that eave condition on the north side. I believe it's attachment 8, photograph number 7. Okay. 7 and 8 actually both show existing roof conditions, purlins and overhang.
Okay, and then you probably had a chance to review the resolution that's been attached to the app or part of the agenda.
Yes.
So it is going to require you to submit the construction drawings of all the different roofs and eaves and fascia details, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Oop. That is. Okay. Is there any questions of the architect from the board or staff? Okay. Anybody else in the public wishing to address the board in this application may do so. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing again, bring it back to the board.
Chair, may I respond regarding the roof shingles?
Yes, please.
So it's condition number 3 speaks to new Class A shingles matching the existing shingles. So it is a common historic preservation practice that when an original wood shingle roof is replaced, that it's replaced in kind. And I think what we're saying is we recognize that the roof was replaced in kind, and we want to continue that in-kind replacement of the shingles to maintain the historic look. So I think all we're asking for is that the roof shingles on the new roof look like the shingles that were on the roof prior.
Okay. And should I open the public hearing up? Adam, is that clear, or do you have an issue with that?
Nope, that's clear.
Okay. Close the public hearing again. So anyone on the board want to start their comments? So I don't hear anybody. So I guess we need to take the opportunity to for the public to understand, Marnie, the proper methodology that should happen. I guess there was some confusion with the structural plans, and I don't know if the structural plans were completely showing a new roof, but certainly general contractors, when they're building something, will start off looking at, I've certainly experienced this, where they'll start looking at the structural plans and may ignore the rest of it for a while. And so that might have been something unclear, not that that's the right way to do it, but if the structural plans were actually showing, removal of the roof and a complete reframe, that's can be quite confusing. And so I guess I don't know whether that's an easy thing for staff to also review, but that's something that possibly could be caught. Do you have thoughts on that, Marnie?
I do. So this has been quite a learning experience for me. We have instituted some new processes to try to prevent this from happening in the future. Staff's expectation is that any time that there is a change between the planning approval and the building permit submittal, that those changes be clearly disclosed to staff. So we don't want to be looking through a set of plans for changes that we don't really know what we're looking for. And so we're really trying to do a better job of communicating that with our applicants. We have some new forms that they can fill out to itemize any changes that they're proposing. Another thing that we really are starting to do is identify any inconsistencies between the different disciplines within a plan set. So oftentimes planners are looking at architectural sheets. We're not looking at structural sheets. So if the architectural plan doesn't show a certain item, then we don't anticipate, that item is going to change. So we do recognize that the structural plans showed something differently than the architectural plans, and we're certainly trying to catch those things going forward.
And I know that's not always easy, especially when you're sometimes dealing with, planners have a limited amount of time. And then oftentimes plan check, I don't know how much is being done in-house, but if you send it out to an outside plan check firm, any sort of planning considerations are not going to be considered, right? Whereas in-house, if Jermel is checking them, you might have an opportunity to be aware of some of the Carmel requirements for that. But I think in general, I think it just needs to be acknowledged that if you're intending to do a reconstruction, that needs to be clear in the application or in the revision application, and documentation of the existing needs to be really clear before any demolition begins. So I guess that's a general comment for not this. Obviously this applicant has been penalized by not being able to work on the project for several months. So that's hopefully not something that other people will repeat.
For the board, I would say we're at a tipping point, though. We have this construction project that's been delayed. The future state is not ideal. Obviously, it's having an impact on the owner and on the neighborhood. But we still got the issue of the new hipped roof, the shingles, fascia, gable roof, and all those things like that. And we don't have great photo evidence from what Marnie was telling us at the site visit. So, I think we either need to approve, they either need to resubmit with a detailed drawing that we can approve that incorporates everything that's been discussed, or we just take this as a learning event and move forward with the proposed construction.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Marnie, but I think Jordan, if the resolution that the staff has proposed includes the resubmission of all that information you're talking about. So I don't think it needs necessarily to go to us, since it's basically reconstructing the existing roof based on the photographic evidence, which I think something can be handled at staff level. But yes, I agree with you that they definitely need to submit proper evidence and then drawings of what they're intending to do that matches that evidence. Does that make sense, Marnie? I think that's basically what the intent of the resolution that you wrote out.
That is correct.
Where is that in the resolution, the resubmission?
I was just looking at it, actually.
The new work shall be, no, sorry.
Starts on page 3 of the draft resolution. There are five items listed there.
Yeah, those are the things that need to be done, but where does it say that they have to resubmit? Because I think that's the issue, right?
So under number 2, it says prior to approval of the design study application, the applicant shall submit photographic evidence of the hipped roof and eave detailing. Additionally, the applicant shall submit construction drawings specifying the size, scale, material, and color of the new roof, eaves, fascia, and purlins.
Okay, got it.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion that we should be using the staff's detailed proposal here? Is there a motion on the application?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend the resolution for a determination of consistency with the standards for the treatment of historic properties for the reconstruction of a hip roof at the Artie Bowen House, Casanova 4 southeast of 9th Avenue, with the conditions that have been submitted to 5 on page 3.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Croman? Board Member Gualtieri?
Hang on.
Yes.
Hang on. I haven't said anything yet.
Okay.
No.
Board Member Gualtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Chair Dyer?
Yes. And I'm happy to give, we're already in roll call, but Jordan, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean,
voting no, just so we're aware of it.
I just think that, I honestly think that we, on this property, we should have tabled it pending the review and then the provision of the new documentation. I still think this documentation is very broad, gives the tremendous, I mean, we've already had an issue. Now we're giving them very broad latitude to continue moving forward. So I think in the future, we really need to rethink how we address an issue like this.
And the point being, you think it should be the board reviewing it, not just staff. Sounds like what you're saying.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it was worth bringing it to the board in the first place, I think that the board should have probably had another opportunity to review it in the state that it would look like going forward.
Okay, fair enough. I think obviously the roll call has already occurred, but I think it was good to hear the rest of the board hear your concerns. That could be maybe implemented in other examples down the line. Okay. Let's see, moving on to MA 22204, Prentice. Consideration of adding the historic Marion Daniels Shand House to the Carmel Register and making a recommendation to the City Council on whether to enter into a Millsap contract with Amanda S. Prentice and Matthew J. Murmer for the historic residence located at Biscayne Avenue 12 southwest of Mountain View. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This is the first of 3 residential Millsap contracts you'll be reviewing tonight. This is for the Marion Daniels Shand House. It's located on Biscayne Avenue 12 southwest of Mountain View Avenue. It is an English cottage style residence constructed in 1923 with a modern style sunroom addition designed by Hugh Comstock in 1937. The original construction was built by a brother pair of contractors, and they used an innovative duplex block construction method that was quite innovative. It uses interlocking concrete block walls, which modulated temperature and were intended to protect the home from moisture and fire. This home was added to the historic inventory in 2022, recorded this summer in 2022. As you're familiar, you must be on the Carmel Register to obtain the benefits of the Mills Act, and the property owner has requested to be added to the Carmel Register. This will require board approval this evening. The Mills Act contracts are a historic preservation incentive. There is a reduction in your property tax in exchange for appropriate rehabilitation, maintenance, and preservation of the property. There are 5 findings that you must find this evening. The first being that the building is designated as a historic resource and is listed on the Carmel register. So it's on the inventory, and you'll choose whether to add it tonight to the register. Finding 2, the proposed rehabilitation and restoration and maintenance plan is appropriate in scope, sufficient to guide the long-term rehabilitation of the home. And the plan should be more significant than simple routine maintenance that you would see on any property. So the rehabilitation and maintenance plan for this particular property involves termite mitigation and maintenance, duct work, pipe work, work in the attic and crawl space, new roof, maintaining the roof, flashing and cleaning of the chimney, restoring that arched front door that is an original feature, restoring original windows, repairing stucco, and ongoing maintenance there, painting the exterior, dry rot repair. There's significant interior mold that will be dealt with. There are non-historic exterior lights that will be replaced. There are non-historic spiral stairs at the rear of the property. And there's also plans to work on the hardscape and landscape, and also tree pruning to protect the home from any falling branches. Finding 3 discusses any proposed alterations and how they will comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Any plans will not significantly alter, damage, or diminish any primary elevation or character defining feature. They will not increase floor area on the property by more than 15% beyond the amount established in the documented original or historic design of the resource. And of course, you can't put a 2nd-story addition on a single-story historic resource. So staff finds that the proposed work will be in accordance with the Secretary's standards. Finding 4, the Millsap contract will aid in offsetting the costs of rehabilitating and maintaining the resource. Staff finds there is a reduction in tax liability, and the funds will be allocated to the rehab projects. And the last finding, approval of a Millsap contract will represent an equitable balance of public and private interests and will not result in a substantial adverse financial impact on the city. Staff finds that there will be a reduction in tax revenue to the city. So far, there was only, so you're allowed, the city does 15 Mills Act contracts allowed in a 3-year period. So you've only approved 1 in 2019. And for this year, there are 5 contracts under review. So we're well under the threshold. And then the remaining portion of the tax revenue will still be allocated to the city. And staff finds that the value of preserving this historic resource offsets the loss of revenue. Staff recommends that the Historic Resources Board add to the register and recommend City Council adoption of a Millsap contract for this property at Scano, 12 southwest of Mountain View, also known as the Marion Daniels Shand House. That's the end of my presentation. I do believe the property owner is on the call this evening.
Hi.
Okay, I had a question for you, Catherine. And you answered it, I think, on the site, but I just wanted to clear it up. The addition of the spiral staircase, deck, and guardrail onto the 1937 edition I wasn't clear where that was documented. You said it was done in the 80s?
Yes, the DPR mentions that it is circa 1980s. And from visual inspection, that would appear accurate. I can show a photo again, but it's a spiral stair accessing the roof of the Comstock sunroom addition and a railing on top of that addition. So the historic consultant who prepared the DPR form did record those changes and still found the property to be a historic resource.
Because I don't see that in the DPR under historic intent, but it may be listed.
It should be under the construction history on page 2 of the DPR. A recent circa 1980s metal rail and spiral staircase was installed. Yep.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions of Catherine from the board?
Yes. With the Mills Act, for instance, let's say just hypothetically that someone saves $10,000 in property taxes in a year. Is all of that money need to be allocated toward the renovation, rehabilitation of the building that we would be discussing?
The funds, the savings are intended to be reallocated to the preservation effort.
That's
solely okay.
But, Barney, do you have confirmation of that?
Yeah, so there's not like a dollar for dollar requirement. The general concept is that the property tax savings frees up funds for homeowners to reinvest in the property. But again, it's not a dollar for dollar requirement.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
How many total Mills Act homes? I know we've been looking at a number of them, but how many total are on the register now?
I believe
11. Yeah, 11.
And then you mentioned this on the site as well, and maybe this was just mentioned. There's 11 altogether, and there was only one in the last 3 years. Is that correct?
One in 2019. None in 2020 or 21.
Okay. Okay, any other questions of staff? No? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing then. Is the applicant's representative here to discuss?
Hi, my name is Amanda Prentice, and Matt Murmer, who's also on the call. We bought the house in December of last year and are delighted to find ourselves responsible for this historic cottage. So it needs a lot of work, and thank you to Catherine for all the help in preparing this application. This is quite an adventure, and of course we're looking for the board's support not only to move this really special, charming cottage onto the registry so that it can be protected, but also for the Mills Act, because the project is financially daunting, and Matt and I do feel a real responsibility to take care of this beautiful little cottage. So if you have any questions, I can say this, although perhaps there, as Marnie said, there's not a dollar for dollar requirement. Our intention is absolutely to take whatever tax savings we reap toward the maintenance of this home and the preservation of it. Just the roof itself, the quotes are astronomical. So I worked with a historian to come up with the budget plan, what it will take to properly maintain it, because it really hasn't been properly maintained. I think it escaped notice, frankly, of the historical review that was done 20 years ago. Somehow it just I think Kent CV and Seth Bergstein were sort of surprised, as were we when we found ourselves the lucky owners. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to address this application may do so. Okay, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Marnie, did you raise your? Okay. I guess I might just say a few words in the beginning. I think this is an amazing historic cottage. I really applaud you for being willing to take this on, and I'm sure it's a lot of restoration and a lot of money that would need to go into that. Again, I'm surprised it wasn't on the inventory too. It's really a spectacular piece. Now, for me, there's different levels, a little bit of what it takes to get a Mills Act, and I think we really want to in my mind, and I think in council's mind, since they limited the number of what we can achieve, are the ones that really need the rehabilitation and ones that are really significant for the town. And for me, I guess I disagree a little bit with the report, the DPR form, and the analysis of the integrity loss from the guardrail over the addition. It really kind of spoils a Comstock addition. I mean, I can imagine that's a nice place to sit, but there are original drawings that was in the DPR from Comstock Associates that show the original roof form of that. And I think I could support recommending to the council that this get a Mills Act and putting it on the register. If part of the maintenance plan was to reconstruct that original roof, I think the guardrail, which is quite prominent from the street, is really, and the spiral staircase is in the rear, so it's not as much a concern, but the guardrail from the street is really quite prominent. And I think that really takes away from the integrity of the residents as a whole. So I don't know if would be something the owners would consider doing, but that's what I would probably want to recommend that.
So I wish I could raise my hand. I want to make sure I'm not interrupting you. So I fully understand the concern, because it wasn't, of course, part of the original roof line. The problem with removing the guardrail is that it's the access for the attic, and in the attic is all of the electrical, and we actually put in a tankless hot water heater. We actually already removed this 20-year-old corroding hot water heater that was looking like it was ready to crash through the ceiling of the living room. And it's something that requires access sort of regularly. So while the spiral staircase, to your point, is it's really unobtrusive. It's pretty tight. It doesn't take up much space. I'm sure that's why they chose to do a spiral. But the guardrail, I mean, I suppose it could come down, but then we've got some safety and liability issues because people will be up there either servicing that thing, or we need access to it. It's kind of, I see the conundrum. I really do. But that's kind of our issue. And in thinking about it, yeah, perfect. So the door, the little access point, looks historic. And in fact, I think that's the historic color. So one of the thoughts I had was maybe one of the things I put in the spreadsheet was when we redo the paint to bring it back to its original colors, and maybe choose that lighter green for the guardrail to make it less obtrusive from the street. The owners that sold to us, I don't think they were really thinking about the historic character of the cottage, like, at all. And that's clear in all the deferred maintenance, the satellite dishes that you see, and probably the color that they chose. And perhaps that lighter green, I guess we don't have to do that tonight, but that could be a compromise that maintains the safety, kind of what Marnie and Catherine had referenced before around the Secretary of the Interior's rehabilitation and standards, making a place actually livable.
Or if Chair Dyer, you have a recommendation for an alteration of the railing, I'd be totally open to that as well.
Okay. It's basically, there's my first recommendation. Well, obviously the public hearing is open, so let me just, I'll address that in a second, but is there anything more either of you would like to say, or another person in the public wishing to address any of that? But I understand, I think your point. So with that, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board, and I'm happy to discuss this with the rest, or have the board give their input on this as well. I understand the functional part of it. It is, and my first recommendation is to put the roof back the way it was originally designed by Hugh Comstock. Now the roof is gone, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll open the public hearing if I'm wrong, but it appears to be just a flat roof now.
Yeah, it's a flat roof, but yeah, exactly. And I don't know how long it has been that way. I don't know if that was in the 80s. We looked back at documents. I don't know.
Okay, so I don't think safety is too much of an issue for a maintenance store with keeping the guardrail. It's basically access. If you use it as a deck, then that's it.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be open to not. I guess
it's.
I'm sorry. The public hearing's closed, and I can, if you want to.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm happy to open it up again if you have more comments. But what I would just finish commenting is that looking at that issue of the functional nature, again, it's a maintenance issue of getting up there. And a flat roof is safe for most maintenance people. People access those things all the time. Obviously, again, not for the public, not for children, not for. And that, I think, by removing the guardrail, that would eliminate the kind of visual contamination and loss of integrity that I see with that, rather than if requiring you to put back the roof as it was would be certainly a more elaborate endeavor. And it also, the slope of the roof would be so low that you don't really see it in an extensive way. So I guess I'd be open to, just the removal of the guardrail as what I would want to see as part of the maintenance plan. But I'll let me have other members of the board comment.
Well, the guardrail doesn't bother me in the sense of, I assumed it was for safety, for people romping up there, but it just didn't bother me. I understand the historic argument that Eric is making in that regard. So I wouldn't make that a consideration one way or the other from my vote, but otherwise, I think it's a wonderful place to restore and keep intact. And we all know that the property taxes that people get a break on don't begin to touch the expense of keeping up a cottage like this. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Any other comments from any other board members?
Eric, would you be happier if there was either a clear glass rail or a cable rail that wasn't as visible?
I don't think so, just because I think those would be almost even more obtrusive to the character of the house. But again, if it's only for maintenance, I think a flat roof is relatively safe. So, but that's.
So Eric, are you suggesting that at one point I heard you say to put the roof back the way Comstock intended? Is that what you said originally?
That's what I said originally, but as I looked at the situation, that might preclude possibly that getting access to that door. I mean, there may be other ways to do it. I don't know if in most houses, there's interior attic access, but I don't know if that's possible in this case.
Do we have, is there an architect on here? Or?
I'm sorry, their architect, I don't know.
Yes, there.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously the kids shouldn't go up there. I saw her comments.
Indeed, but there's a lot of things that we tell them not to do. But
would it be better, Eric, if they removed the spiral staircase and used a ladder when they needed to get up there?
That's what I recommend, yeah. So, I mean, obviously that keeps the kids from getting up there.
I support that. I think that's a good idea too.
Another option might be to replace the railing with a Comstock railing, which we have many examples of in the city.
Oh.
I'm open to that. I think I would, I don't have a specific suggestion about that though, but I mean, I think that's something that could possibly, if there's a design alteration that's more appropriate, that could be brought back to us for review. Because I'm certainly, I just be clear, I'm very in favor of this house as an historic, going on the register. And if you go on the register and you go on the inventory, you know, you can keep whatever you have, right? What we're differentiating is the Mills Act and maintenance plans and trying to keep the level of, the high level of significance on the ones we give the Mills Act to. And this is our opportunity to keep it as close to the historic nature of the original as possible.
And I would support that also. I would be interested in what Board Member Croman thinks.
Yep. Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand, especially with that, you know, well-known addition, the well-known architect making that addition. It's not like it was just any architect. However, you know, I think that it's the house they have now, and when we approve current houses, we usually let, you know, the addition stay, and it wouldn't prevent me from recommending it for Mills, certainly, that railing. Although if there's other alternatives like making it a more historically accurate railing or something like that, I think that'd be great. But that railing wouldn't prevent me from recommending it for Mills. I think it is a great example, and obviously the current owners want to do the right thing with it, which is great.
Okay. So with that, I guess there's a little bit of, I'm not sure there's consensus on the board about this. Maybe I'll open up the public hearing and ask Ms. Prentice and Mr. Murmur about whether they would like to explore that opportunity, or would you like us to make a vote now on, I guess what we're asking is, do you want to go back and review, perhaps hire someone to review the details?
I'd be comfortable giving you my word that we'd be interested in being in accordance with your recommendation with Comstock's original vision for a railing and changing the existing one. But I'd much rather not have to redo this process again and put it to you for a vote.
Okay, and then I'll close the public hearing again. I guess I have one suggestion as a maybe a compromise that I'll see if the board would be interested in, is to have so that we can vote on this tonight, is add a condition of approval for the maintenance plan to consider to require the guardrail be part of redoing the guardrail as part of the maintenance plan as something that is more appropriate.
I could support that.
I could support that, meaning a Comstock railing. Yeah.
Well, it needs to be differentiated, at least. That's the other problem with it, I guess. Is that
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
What I mean?
I have one in mind, but can't.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I think the idea of a Comstock railing, in theory, is a nice idea, and it might look very nice. It's just legally, there's an issue of differentiation of if that is made to look like it was part of the original, then that may be a problem. But I'm willing to let staff, I mean, this may be an ongoing maintenance thing in the future. I mean, it may be down the line within the 10-year spectrum. I don't have a condition I don't have any, certainly for my own self, I wouldn't require it to be in any particular year of the 10-year contract and leave that up to the owners. But I'd like to see it, a new guardrail on that. That's more appropriate. Marnie, is that confusing to you?
No, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. So the board is making a recommendation to the council on this contract. So it would be appropriate for you to include in your motion what your recommendation is on the railing for the council's consideration. Also, I agree with you. We do want to be careful about creating a false sense of history. And so I want you guys to know that just when the owners go to implement their maintenance plan, they will go through our process and we will be reviewing all changes for consistency with the Secretary's standards. So that is something that we will do at a staff level. And certainly if this is an item that you'd like to see again, we could bring it back to you at such time that the change is proposed.
Here's my problem though. We're actually, now we're fabricating something that didn't, we're not trying to recreate something that was there before and has fallen into disrepair. Now we're trying to fabricate something that was never there as far as we know, and trying to make it look authentic, which is, I think Eric mentioned, is something exactly, you know, we always take steps to make sure that there's a discernibility between what is actual and what's rebuilt. So I think we're entering into a dicey, slippery area. As much as I think intentions are great and it would probably look a lot better, I think we're trying to build historicity into something that is not historic and never was.
I think that's a good point, Jordan. So why don't we, I think in the interest of the owners who have put this forward as an application, why don't we see where the board is at and have someone make a motion, and maybe Jordan, you want to make it for a clean recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. I think that we adopt a resolution to add the property located in Vincenzo and 12 Southwest Mountain View onto the Historic Resources Register, and recommended that it go forward for consideration as a Mills Act contract.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman?
Yes.
Board Member Gualtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Chair Dyer?
No. So that passes. Okay, so we'll move on to, good luck with it though. I mean, it's an amazing house.
Thank you very much.
I was being a stickler, but
we'll do our best. We'll do our best.
A lot of problems with, as Jordan mentioned, trying to replace the guardrail. I mean, I would prefer to see it as the Comstock original. So if that's ever in part of your vision, I would recommend it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will do our very best.
Moving on to MA 22-214 Ludwig, consideration of adding the historic Frederick 10 Winkle House to the Carmel Register and making a recommendation to the City Council on whether to enter into a Mills Act contract with Christopher and Adrian Ludwig Trust for the historic residence located at the southeast corner of San Antonio Avenue and 4th. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. This is the Frederick 10 Winkle House, southeast corner of San Antonio Avenue and 4th Avenue. It was designed and built by the Carmel master builder M.J. Murphy in 1925 for the original owner, Frederick 10 Winkle, who operated a furniture and hardware store on Ocean. This property was added to the inventory in 2005, recorded in 2007. We've just been over this with the Prentice property, so instead I'll just describe the formal English garden pictured there. And you've heard the spiel about the Mills Act, so this is the primary facade that you're looking at. The same 5 findings for this property. Staff found that the building is listed on the inventory and the property owners have requested to add it to the register. Pictured here is a detached garage, historic garage. Finding 2, the maintenance plan that they have submitted is more significant than routine maintenance, and staff has found that it's sufficient in scope to guide the long-term rehabilitation and maintenance of the home. Their plan was prepared by Dr. Kirk and includes restoration of the stone chimney, work on the landscape and hardscape, exterior paint, restoration of exterior iron features such as shutter hinges, also work on the gutters, foundation, electrical, which has now been to wiring, plumbing work. Plumbing was leaking. Work on windows and doors, and also re-roofing the home. Staff has found that these proposals would be in compliance with the Secretary standards. They don't involve increasing the floor area or a second-story addition. And the Mills Act will aid in offsetting the costs of rehabilitating the home. And finding 5, yes, this approval of the Mills Act contract will mean a reduction in tax revenue, but the value of historic preservation will offset the loss of that revenue. Our homeowner, Adrian Ludwig, assisted Dr. Kirk in preparing the maintenance plan, and she is on the call this evening. And staff recommendation is to add the home to the register and recommend City Council adoption of the Millsap contract for the property located on the southeast corner of San Antonio Avenue, 4th Avenue, known as the Frederick and Winkle House. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions of Catherine? Okay, great. I will open up the public hearing. Is the applicant or applicant's representative here?
Yes, Chris Ludwig here, and my wife Adrian is right next to me. Yeah, we'll keep it relatively short. First off, thank you, Catherine, for all of your help here. You did a wonderful job helping us get through all of this. We purchased the house in December, and we've been thrilled with everything that we've been able to do in Carmel with our family. One of the things that attracted us to this process was this home is on such a prominent corner, and it already has such charm. And that was why we were excited about it in the first place. This is frankly a dream come true a lot earlier in our lives than we were expecting. It already has such charm, and we think it could be so much. And for all the people who are coming right by here who can see this thing that really, to me, it really shouts Carmel. It's everything that attracted us about this city in the first place, and why we ended up wanting to take this step. And so we're really excited to actually really pour a lot of ourselves into this. I think the one that stands out to me first is this landscaping. I think the landscaping can enhance the appearance of this home so much, but then there's lots more. There's all of the physical components of the stone, the chimney, so much stuff that we want to do. This very old fence that I'm looking at right now. So anyway, that's our vision for this, and we really appreciate the council's consideration, the board's consideration. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Any questions of Mr. Ludwig? Okay. Anyone else in the public wishing to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
Well, I'll start by saying that I think Carmel is very lucky to have young homeowners such as the past 2 applications we've had wishing to purchase and renovate, rehabilitate these very historic houses that we're also proud of. And I would support this particular application and have another Mills Act contract that will make us all proud.
I agree, Catherine.
Can I just ask one question? procedural question. I know the question of color came up, and the homeowner said that they intended to keep the current color, but just from the staff. So if we approve this and they decided they want to go to a different color, they would have to resubmit to the Historic Resources Board for the color change. Is that correct?
Typically, paint is a no fee permit, but it does come before staff to be reviewed. The whatever proposed paint color they'd be proposing, yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Yeah, I think it's just a spectacular home. Your excitement about it, Mr. Ludwig, is infectious. I think it's going to be great that you're going to be doing all this stuff, and the gardens, I agree, will be just spectacular. And it's such a prominent location. Everyone really in town and everyone who visits town gets to enjoy looking at your home from that really prominent corner. So I'm excited. I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer. It's amazingly historic home. The integrity is completely intact. So I certainly can only recommend approval for this. Thank you.
I'm ready to make a motion. Are you ready to hear it?
Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. MA 22-214, recommend adding the historic Frederick 10 Winkle house to the Carmel Register, and recommend to the City Council to enter into a Millsap contract with Christopher and Adrian Ludwig Trust for the historic residence located at the southeast corner of San Antonio Avenue and 4th Avenue.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman?
Yes.
Board Member Gualtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Chair Dyer?
Yes. Thanks so much and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank
Good luck.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Now on to MA 22-254, Strom and Miller, consideration of adding the historic Eunuch A. Lewis House to the Carmel Register and making a recommendation to the City Council on whether to enter into a Millsap contract with Nancy Strom and Gavin Miller for the historic residence located at Monteverde Street 2 northeast of 9th. Staff report again, please.
This is the Enoch A. Lewis House located on Monteverde Street 2 northeast of 9th. It was designed and built by an unknown architect and builder circa 1906 for Enoch A. Lewis. It's significant for its architecture. It was added to the historic inventory in 2005, recorded in 2007. As you know, it must be on the register to obtain the Mills Act benefits, and the property owner has requested it be added to the register. The Mills Act contract is a reduction in property tax in exchange for maintaining the building. This photo shows the front porch. Finding number 1, the building is listed as a historic resource on the inventory and submitted the request for the register. You're looking here at the rear facade, rear elevation, excuse me. Finding 2, the maintenance plan prepared by architect Brian Congleton has been found sufficient to guide the long-term rehabilitation of the home. It is more intensive than typical routine maintenance would be. This photo shows the south elevation. Their restoration and maintenance plan involves replacing the front stair, which the board reviewed last month. It also involves repairing the side stair and landing, rehabilitating the rear studio and shed pictured here, running electrical to the shed, working on the landscape, removing soil around the shed foundation, repairing the door on the shed and the home, repairing windows, patching and painting, repairing the roof, again, shed and home, working on the brick chimneys, 2 chimneys, one on the rear elevation and one on the north elevation, doing gutter work and drainage. Right now, the home has some drainage issues on the south elevation. The staff has found that the proposed work is compliant with the Secretary's standards. There's no second story addition planned or increase in floor area. And the funds will be reallocated to the rehabilitation projects. Pictured here is a door on the rear elevation. And here you can see some of the gutters and wood shingles. And staff finds that this application meets finding number 5, that approving the Millsap contract will not result in a substantial adverse financial impact to the city. So staff does recommend that the Historic Resources Board add to the register and recommend City Council adoption of the Millsap contract for this property on Monteverde Street to northeast of 9th, also known as the Enoch A. Lewis House. And that concludes my presentation, and the property owner, Nancy Strom, is with us this evening.
Okay, thank you again, Catherine. Any questions of staff from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Nancy, would you like to address the board?
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little emotional. I just feel very protective and very fortunate that we have the house. And my husband and I have both felt all along that really we're more the custodians of the house. It's like that old adage of you're taking care of the earth for your grandchildren. And we will continue to maintain the house in its historic fashion. We love it. It's just a wonderful resource. And I just also want to thank all of you for your interest in the project. I've seen you guys at work a couple of times now, and I'm impressed with your acumen, and it's from the heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant by any members of the board or staff? Okay. Anyone else in the public wishing to address this application? May do so now. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you. Would like to begin on our board.
I mean, I'll start. It is amazing. I just have to say, we're so fortunate to live here, and just the 3 houses we've seen that are applications for Mills Act consideration, very different, but so great. And this is another home. I think that the owners definitely are trying to do the right thing. I think their repairs are realistic. They make perfect sense. They don't detract from the home, and they'll preserve another great historic resource. So I would be, as written, fully in favor of endorsing both adding this to the historic resource and register, and as another Mills applicant.
Okay, thank you, Jordan.
I'll second what I'll second what Jordan said. He put it perfectly, and I'll just go along with what he said and say it. I agree with him.
Number 3 here.
I agree as well. It's a beautiful house. We should certainly support having it preserved and maintained.
Yeah, I think it's really one of the special ones. It's a very unique home in Carmel, one of the oldest. And obviously we have an owner who really cares and loves for it and is going to be doing a lot of work. So this is a great example of what the Mills Act is for. So I'm very supportive of the application and the resolution, which I hope to hear very soon as a motion.
Okay, I'll do it. MA 22-254, Strom and Miller. Move to approve adding the historic Enoch A. Lewis House to the Carmel Register and recommending to the City Council to enter into a Millsap contract with Nancy Strom and Gavin Miller for the historic residence located at Monteverde Street, 2 northeast of 9th Avenue.
Second.
Great. Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman,
Yes.
Board Member Gualtieri,
Yes.
Board Member Hall,
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy,
Yes.
Chair Dyer.
Yes. Thanks again so much and good luck.
Oh, thank you. My heart's beating. Thank you so much.
Good.
Can't wait to get going on the project also. Thank you.
Very good.
Keep that heart beating.
Okay. Moving on to DS 22044 Harris. This is, there was a request for a continuance on this item. And so, and I believe that's still correct, Marnie?
That is correct.
Okay. And we'll move on to our last major item here, action item, DR 22157, GB Pastor Building, consideration of a conceptual review of a design review application, DR 22157, that includes the proposed relocation of the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Community Room located on the southeast corner of Dolores and 7th in the Service Commercial Zoning District. Staff report, please. Evan, I believe.
Thank you. Whoever's hosting the meeting, can you please enable screen sharing for me? There we go. Just a minute. Okay. Thank you. So the subject site is known as the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Bank Complex. It was constructed in 1972. Both the bank building and subject community room were built at the same time. The complex was designed by Walter Bertie and William Shaw, both of who are recognized in the historic context statement as significant architects. And the complex is representative of the Second Bay tradition style. The subject site is comprised of 4 lots. The complex is comprised of lot 2, 4, 6, and 8. Interestingly, lots 2 and 4 are under one ownership. Lots 6 and 8 are under a separate ownership. Tonight's discussion, however, only focuses on lots 2, 4, and 6. So what we'll be focusing on tonight is the relocation of the community room, which is on lot 6, to lot 4, which is right here. The purpose of the relocation is due to a future project proposed for lots 6, 8, and 10, which is not under consideration currently. Again, by this separate ownership of lots 6, 8, and 10. But again, to accommodate that development, they are requesting that the community room be relocated from lot 6 to lot 4. So just as a review regarding the subject site's historic status, there are 3 registers: the National Register, the State Register, and then the Local Register and Inventory. The complex was found not eligible for the National Register or the Carmel inventory as it had not reached 50 years old. There is a provision in the municipal code that states that if a site has not reached 50 years old, but is of exceptional importance, it can be listed on the inventory. However, it was found at the time, I'm sorry, I'll backtrack a little. The HRB did initially find previously that the subject site was eligible for listing on the inventory as an exceptional building despite not meeting that 50-year threshold. However, that decision was overturned on appeal to the city council, who found that the building had not met that threshold due to that 50-year significance mark, and the city council did issue a determination of ineligibility. That determination of ineligibility is set to expire on October 26th of this year, and at that time the site will need to be reevaluated. Even though the site is not listed at the national or local level, the property is eligible for listing at the state level on the California Register under Criterion 3 architecture as a significant example of Bay traditional style. And that's exceptional importance threshold for the being less than 50 years old. That does not apply to the state register. There's no age criteria. So when you have a property that is found eligible for listing in the California Register of Historic Resources, it must be treated as a historic resource for the purposes of CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. So even though it's not listed, it's just eligible, we still must treat it as a historic resource. So a brief summary of the past hearings. The project was previously reviewed for the proposed demolition of the community room. The project was for the J.B. Pasteur building, which proposed a mixed-use building across lots 6, 8, and 10. As a reminder, those were the southern 3 lots. The HRB determined that the demolition of the community room was not consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards, and that the demolition of the community room would negatively impact the Bake building and overall site. And then that decision was appealed to the City Council, and the City Council did uphold the HRB's decision, and the appeal was denied. The City Council did not adopt any additional findings. What they did was they pointed to your initial decision, the HRB's decision, and said, we are adopting the HRB's findings and agree with their decision to issue the finding of noncompliance, that the demolition is inconsistent with those standards. Excuse me. However, the code does state that after a year, you are able to resubmit a project for a substantially similar project. So what the applicant has done is they've submitted a new design review application for a scope of work similar to the project previously proposed. However, as opposed to demolishing the community room, the applicant is proposing to relocate the community room from the southern side of the existing bank building to the eastern side. So the applicant is asking for conceptual feedback only. This is not a formal hearing. There are no elevations illustrating the spatial relationships between the bank building and relocated community room. They aren't showing any on-site improvements. Again, this is just a conceptual hearing to ask the HRB, are you supportive of this proposed change? Just as kind of a side note, this shouldn't be the focus of the hearing, but it's unclear if the location or orientation would be a sufficient location. For example, the plans do show a 4-foot 8-inch setback between the buildings. However, as you can see here, there's about a 6 to 7 foot overhang of the bank building, which is not shown on the plans. So again, notwithstanding that, you know, the question is not, is this an appropriate location? Just are you willing to consider this as an alternative proposal? Not, will the building fit? That's not the purpose of this discussion. So again, in May 2021, the HRB issued a finding of noncompliance for the demolition of the community room. The board adopted specific findings as to why the demolition failed to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. And those findings did include statements regarding the spatial and contextual relationships between the bank building and community room, Below is a list of those findings. The full list of findings were included as attachment 4 in the staff report. And then while the proposed scope of work under this application is for the relocation, not demolition, many of those same findings may still be applicable to the proposed relocation, despite the building proposed to be maintained on the same site. And while demolition was not supported by the HRB, staff is requesting that the Historic Resources Board provide feedback to the applicant on whether the proposed relocation of the community room is an alternative that may be considered, or if the community room shall be maintained in its current state and location as previously found. And then regardless of the outcome, support for the proposed relocation does not constitute a guarantee of future approval. If you are supportive, we will of course require a phase 2 evaluation by a qualified professional and a complete set of plans that illustrates the spatial relationship and a full relocation plan of the building. Again, this is just a conceptual review just to get your initial feedback on the proposed plans or the proposed project. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So, Evan, is it clear, based on what you said, is it clear that you guys have not done any measurements or any spatial diagramming or anything like that, other than the slide and paste of that one footprint item? You guys have done nothing to determine if this is even a viable option or not?
That's correct. We're looking for your input before we move forward regarding any decisions that would require further evaluation into the project.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to bring up something that's probably inappropriate, but then sometimes I am. When we first voted on this, the HRB last year, what happened was that 2 were for providing historic status to the building. 1 was not, and 1 abstained. And I believe there were 4 of us at the time. We were told at that time, before the abstaining vote, that if there was an abstain vote, that it would deny the historic status of the building. We heard then in the next day or 2 that the code had been reviewed, and indeed that was incorrect, that it meant that that abstain vote meant that it would be deemed historic. So that's been kind of bothering me for over a year now, in that I think there was a misrepresentation, not intentional, of course, to what that abstain vote was. So my question is, do we need to revisit this?
Brandon, I'm going to look to you for that one. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I wish we had prepared a little bit for that question, since we were just here for a conceptual review. I don't think the last time the Historic Resources Board talked about this project, there wasn't a determination of whether the property was historic or not. The decision in front of the board was whether or not the proposed project was consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. And the Historic Board found that it was not. That was the way it shook out eventually. And that decision was appealed by the applicant to the city council. I don't know if that answers your question, Board Member Hall, but it wasn't a determination of whether or not the building was historic or not. That wasn't what was before the HRB last time.
The one over a year ago?
Correct. It was whether or not the proposed project to demolish the community room, whether or not that was consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards or not. And the ultimate way that it shook out was that it was not consistent, and that decision was appealed by the applicant, the property owner, to the city council, and the city council upheld the HRB's decision that demolishing the community room would not be consistent.
So I apologize. I realized I was on mute, and now I understand why no one was listening to me. But what I was just going to say, I believe it was established that it was eligible for California listing, thus it had to be required to be reviewed for the Secretary standards. Is that your understanding too, Brandon?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's a little bit of an oddball because it's not our typical process. It's ineligible. It's currently ineligible for our local inventory, but it is eligible for the state register. And because it's eligible for the state register, it follows our same typical process as if it were listed on our inventory.
Could I ask a question in that regard? Under CEQA, is there any requirement to do a focused EIR when this kind of situation comes up in your experience, either Evan or Brandon?
Not in my experience, no. Because there hasn't been a determination made yet to the actual significance of the building, plus the determination of whether or not if the project were to be doing something that was a significant unavoidable impact to the resource, then that could trigger some additional CEQA work. But if the board, that's why we're doing this conceptual hearing. If the board were to determine that moving the structure behind the bank building was a significant unavoidable impact to the historic resource, and the applicant wanted to continue forward with that project, then obviously we would need to do the CEQA work. And if it's significant and unavoidable, that's when you end up having to do an EIR, because you have to talk about overriding considerations and things like that for actually doing that essentially damage to the historic resource. So we're still early enough in the process. It's hard enough to say for sure what the environmental work will do. But at this point in the game, there wouldn't be anything like that.
So what we're being asked today is to take this potential orphan of a building and see where it could fit somewhere so that it would be out of the way of a future project on the other lots.
Yeah, essentially what we're asking you to consider, Board Member Galtieri, is sort of like a thumbs up, thumbs down, red light, green light. Are you even interested? Do you think there's essentially any chance that shifting the community room behind the building, in your opinion, is an approach that you would suggest the applicant explore, or is it just a non-starter? The applicant made the request for this meeting, just kind of take a temperature of the board before they put too much effort into actually designing it and spending the money on the plans.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions of staff by the board? Okay, and before I open the public hearing, I just wanted to mention I don't think it's a conflict, but my firm did have discussions with Esperanza Carmel on another project that didn't move forward. But again, I don't think that's a conflict, but I wanted to acknowledge that. So with that, I will open up the public hearing, and I see June has comments to make.
And Chair Dyer, could I was furiously looking through the procedures for HRB. Would it be okay if I would just want to close the loop on Board Member Hall's question? Because now that I have the procedures in front of me. So Board Member Hall, the way it went down last time, if you recall, the motion on the floor was whether or not the demolition of the community room was consistent. What happened was one of your members did abstain, and what the rules of procedure say, that a board member may be permitted to abstain from voting because of unpreparedness on an issue before the board. All votes of a member who disqualifies him herself shall be recorded as an abstention. If a board member participates in the proceedings, which is what we had happen on a matter, and then abstains from voting, the vote shall be recorded as an affirmative vote on the motion. So what happened was the abstention became an affirmative vote for the motion, which was to consider it not consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So that abstention became a yes to that vote. And that's how it ended up being considered not consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So that's what you're recalling. It wasn't whether or not the property was historic or not, but that's ultimately how it all went down.
Thank you.
That clarification, Brandon. So with that, I will go ahead and open the public hearing then. Is the applicant or applicant's representative who would like to speak first?
Can I start, Chris?
Of course.
Okay, hi, June Ciliano. I'm a local architect, architect for the proposed JB Pastor building. A few comments with regards to Evan's report regarding the overhang and the location of our proposal to move the community building. The community building has no overhang, so the community building will probably be under the overhang of the low rest of the restaurant, and if need be, there's room to push it towards the east of the property. So that's one. Secondly, I just want to point out right now this community building serves a better purpose for the restaurant. They are using it as a function room, so we thought it would be good for them to continue using it as a function room. And then thirdly, in preparation for this, with the owner's consent, we started doing measure drawing of the community building. We've discussed this with several engineering companies that we work with as far as structure, mechanical, plumbing, to make sure that if ever there's a possibility of the board agreeing to move it, that it's realistic, it can be done, and it will not destroy the integrity of the historic building. So I just want to comment on that. And then I also respond to board member Croman's question, if there's any drawings that's been prepared or have we started looking into it, the answer is yes. So that's all I want to comment on. I think Chris Mitchell with the ownership group is here to also make a comment.
Thank you, June. Chris?
Hello. I don't have anything major to comment. We sort of discussed what we needed to on site, I guess. Our original plan was to demolish the building. It was suggested to us by multiple parties that rather than push to demolish the building, it might make more sense to relocate the building. So this is the avenue we've taken. We have checked that it will fit, and we're very comfortable it will fit. And we're just looking today to understand whether you guys would be in favor of that, as opposed to us, our original plan to demolish the property. That's it, really. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to address this concept before us today? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the board.
Eric, you and I had some concerns over the spatial relationship of the building, the bank building, and the community room as they were originally designed to work together. I'd be interested in your opinion as to how moving the community room to the east side of the property would fit in with our original concerns.
Okay, well, I think it changes the spatial relationship entirely. It's kind of would create a completely new one where this community room would be kind of scrunched in. I think it's so tight, it would really make it difficult to really make that functionally work. And I think one important thing we should realize is that the findings that were voted on by the board, and then were upheld by the city council, specifically talk about the existing spatial relationships, and that those are part of the character defining elements of this building. I mean, it goes back to the idea that these were designed together, whatever the intention of the program was at some point or another. The architects included this in all their drawings. It was clearly the south-facing facade and the west-facing facade were designed with this community room as part of that composition. So if you just pick it up and throw it to the end, you create a completely new separate one that's not part of the original design intent nor part of the significant spatial relationship or character-defining parts of the building. So that's, I think, in my opinion, by, basically having this, approving this kind of concept, you're you're kind of negating what we said before and voted on, and we're kind of disrespecting what the council decided to uphold. I think there are really, again, functional relationships with the whole idea of moving this to the back, and you might even have to cut the original building's roof to make this even fit. It just doesn't seem to work at all. I mean, the one thing that does seem to be an interesting prospect is we had talked about, trying to make this work for the applicant if, the need to build an underground garage. I know Catherine and I disagreed with this, is that I suggested that the reconstruction of that building be allowed as part of the secondary standards. Maybe if you can move it, maybe that's even a better, less costly solution. Is you move it during construction, build the underground garage and supporting foundations, and then move it back onto the podium. It's, I mean, that seems to be viable to me, but the idea of just moving it to another place where it doesn't fit doesn't seem to work in my mind at all.
Thank you.
Other board members?
Well, having not minded it being demolished, I considered it an afterthought building. It was built after the bank building. And I didn't think it was significant to save from demolition at the time. So from my perspective, I don't care where it goes, I guess. So
I'm not sure that that's so, Carol, that it was built after the bank building. This is a design that the architects conceived and envisioned together. I could be wrong, but that's what my impression was. What about you, Eric?
That's my understanding. The drawing, I mean, I did have a chance to see the full construction documents and working drawing, building permit documents, and that community room was always there. I believe it is built at the same time as the original building. I mean, the unfortunate thing here is just, the property line is in this weird position where this community room is not on the same property as the original resource. So that's unfortunate. But I think there's possible solutions that can make it something that really could work for everybody. But
I know we haven't heard from everyone, and I'm waiting to hear what Jordan and Kathy think. But I don't see the rush to this. I don't see why we would want to go forward without an investigation into some other way to keep the building on the site as we conceived it and felt it was significant. And also the council upheld our decision. So to me, this is poor timing.
And let me just be clear with Brandon and Marnie. What we're doing here is a discussion for the owners and their team to gauge, we're not voting on anything, in other words, is that they're just gauging our opinion and getting it. So
that's absolutely correct, Mr. Chair, yes.
So obviously I'm giving my opinion and Catherine's giving hers and Carol's giving hers. I think probably the other board members should talk about their own feelings about this.
I was not on the board a year ago when this originally came up. So I don't have all that background, but I think it seems like a reasonable compromise. You'd still have the building. The owners of that corner lot would still have use of the building, and the applicant would be able to build their project, which, as I understand, is more significant and beneficial to the site than having that little building there. So I would be open to having the building moved.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Jordan, do you have a comment?
I abstained from the initial vote because although I felt more along the lines of Carol, that it wasn't really that significant, and I didn't really buy into the whole spatial relationship. There is some argument, and I think you guys made a reasonable argument about that, and the staff was fairly, did a pretty good lay down for us. Having said that, I don't think that jamming it up against the side of that other building is going to do anything other than, provide a way forward for the new project. I don't think at that point then you have any kind of spatial relationship. It's like a shed that's attached to it. Having said that, one thing we see a lot is that architects can be very innovative, and I would be open to listening to a proposal that they had. I think at that point, until we see an actual proposal, I think we just don't really know what's in their mind. And so I think we're doing them a disservice by just saying no. So I would be open to hearing it again. I'm not sure, at that point what we would see, but I'd be open to hearing it.
Yeah. I guess in my opinion, if the decision was to agree to move the building, I would probably disagree. I'd rather just have nothing there or something else there than moving, what I consider part of the historic fabric or significant fabric of the building itself, and then tacking it on somewhere else, which everything changes in. It's not part of the design intent. It destroys, I think, what the architects were trying to do and the designers were trying to do originally. So I don't see this as a compromise. I would say it's it's either, if you're going to rip it off and take it off, but don't try to tack it on somewhere where it doesn't fit. So I don't know if is anyone on the board wishing to give any other opinions or give insight? I think we have, hopefully that gave the ownership and their team a good idea of where everyone stands on it. Brandon, June, do you want to have another comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to clarify, Eric, you mentioned something about spatial relationship of the building, and so did board member Galtieri. So if I can just clarify it, long share, hold on. Let me share a screen here. Am I sharing the screen now?
Yes, I see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so currently the community building is next to the restaurant along Dolores Street. We're proposing for it to go behind the restaurant on the east side. So since the relationship currently is side by side on Dolores, would you consider putting the building on the 7th Avenue side towards the front instead of the rear? So there'll still be some sense of spatial relationship. I don't know if you see my arrow here. What if you put it here? That will yield the same relationship between the two buildings if you put it here. Is that something that can be considered? We haven't asked the owner of the restaurant. I'm just exploring possibilities, because this is that relationship right now, and we can create that same distance here. So instead of putting it in the back, is this an option for discussion?
Okay, well, speaking for myself, I mean, again, I think it was designed with the intention of being where it is. And I think moving it to the back, it kind of changes everything, and the whole, not only spatial, but how it looks from the street, the elevational look of it, the way the roofs work together. It just wasn't intended to. Well, it also just, if you consider the building historic, that's creating almost a false sense of history in my mind. So again, if you were going to, I don't support it being destroyed or moved, but if it was to be moved, I would rather just have it, demolished. And if you wanted to build another building over here, that could be you could do it with the Secretariat standards if the restaurant wanted another annex or something. But I mean, I basically think it's a false sense of history if you take a component, which I could consider at least part of the historic piece of the building. I see the two as kind of part of the same thing. So, taking a leg off and putting it on your ear or something, I don't think really works. But.
And in my opinion, the community room has been where it is. It will be 50 years in October. I agree with Eric. I don't see the reason to just move it because it will be easier to put it next to the restaurant. That isn't where the architects envisioned it to be, and the original owner of the bank. So I think you're going down the wrong path with that.
I think Chris Mitchell also wants to comment.
Sure. Go to Chris.
I just thought it was relevant to raise one thing. I think there's possibly some confusion. I think we'd all agree that the annex building and the main savings and loan building were built at the same time, but the original plan was just to build the savings and loan building. And then, if I understand correctly, the savings and loan company decided they wanted to have community rooms on all of their banks around the area, around the state. So it was an add-on to the design. So whilst it was built at the same time, it wasn't their original design. And again, I understand, allegedly, the architect was never proud of the community room and didn't really want to add it on. He was told to do so by the savings and loan company. So I actually think the historicity and the importance of this building to the architects that built it is being misconstrued in some respect, in my opinion.
Okay.
That was it.
Thank you. I guess my response to that would be, I guess what would change my mind on it if there was actually drawings of, say, the south elevation without the building as part of it. I mean, the drawings I saw that were part of the building permit documents, I assume, the community room was always there. I mean, my thought has always been, if you remove that and you're left with looking at a side of a building that wasn't meant to be seen like that. So I don't think you can just yank off part of it and then you have to sort of replace it with something or understand that what the architect's intent was for a building standing alone. And I haven't seen those documents. So any other comments from the board? And again, I'll go back and say, I think it's important to have this other building built any way that, the board can at least, again, this is my opinion, and this is obviously there's some disagreements on the board, so you have to take that into consideration. But certainly moving it for the construction, reconstructing it for the construction, I would be supportive of.
What's the timeline? I would ask, what's the timeline if we agree to hear thoughts on this? What's the timeline you guys are looking at?
Is this for us?
I think that was a question for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, we'd like to move forward as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So I think, Chris, the question maybe is like, how long would it take you guys to pull together, the more detail that like board member Croman was talking about?
Probably the same amount of time it would take for us to be scheduled in the next meeting, but I suppose we need to prepare the plans first, then submit. So I think we could be ready by September meeting. Might be optimistic, but probably October.
There's a little bit more lead time on our end. We have to engage with a consultant to prepare a phase 2.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that one of the considerations will be by then the building will be 50 years old.
That's correct. That date is quickly approaching. It really doesn't change the process because it's still eligible for the California register. So whether it's listed on the local inventory or just eligible for the state register, we're still reviewing it against the same standards. However, we still will want to review it for the local eligibility.
I don't know how eligible it would be for the national register, but Carmel only has a few buildings like the Mission and Sunset Center currently, and Flanders Mansion currently listed on the national register. But I think it should be evaluated, it would be evaluated on those criteria as well. And that's a fairly more significant list of properties than the California register or the local inventory. And I think Chair Dyer and I both felt at the last meeting a year ago when we discussed all this, that this building was in our minds of exceptional importance from an architectural standpoint as a creation by Bertie and Shaw, that for lack of 50 years, it would have been on probably a lot sooner. So I think we've struggled with this over the years, but we shouldn't give up now and just throw it away because it's not quite there.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any other comments from the board? I mean, again, I think everyone kind of aired their views on it. Any other questions from staff of the board?
I think we're good, Mr. Chair. I'll see if Evan has anything additional, but that really, I think answered what we were looking for and gave some direction to the applicant as they had requested as well.
I have nothing additional.
Okay. I'll open the June or Chris, any other comments you'd like to make?
I just had one clarification. Did you say that you would like to see a CGI or an elevation of what the building would look like without the annex building?
Well, you mentioned you thought it was not the part of the architect's original design. So I would.
It is in the historical review. I'm sure they said they designed it as one building, and then we're told to add the extra building. So obviously, when they went for planning, both buildings were there, but the original design, which unfortunately we don't have, and unfortunately the architects are no longer with us, so we can't speak to them about it directly.
There is.
That was our understanding.
Yeah, there is archives. I'm not sure where Will Shaw's archives are. I mean, there's other resources you might be able to find some of the original drawings.
I think we'd be lucky to find the paper versions.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the only thing I needed to clarify. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think any other public comment? Seeing now, I'll close the public hearing, and I think the board's made their comments. If everyone's fine to move on, I can move on to the next agenda item. Okay, so the next one is the director's report. And Marnie may be giving it as usual.
I actually don't have any items to report on this month. I do want to congratulate the board, though. This is the heftiest meeting that I've seen in the last 5 years. And I felt like we went through it very efficiently. So good work to you all. And then again, best wishes to board member Galtieri.
And thank you to you too, Marnie, and all of you on the board, the staff. It's just been a pleasure working with each of you. And I've learned a lot, and I will stand behind you and support your work as you go forward, making the historic preservation program as good as it can be for the city. So thanks a lot for all the things. Brandon, your staff has just been fantastic, including Marnie.
Thank you, Catherine. And please stay in touch. Don't be too much of a stranger.
No, I promise.
Okay. Future agenda items. I guess our next meeting is September 19th. And with that, there's no other comments from anybody. I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.